like to welcome Nate Thompson to the Business Growth Podcast. Nate is the CEO and founder of Triumphant Partners, which is a company that specializes on the sell side, helping physicians and dentists sell their practices. So, Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's great. So, just curious, man, how did you get into that niche? I mean, it's such a unique business, and just curious how you started. I mean, did you go straight out of school, or was there a more circuitous route that got you there? Or?
It's a great question that's often asked. A niche is a perfect way to describe it. If you would have told me I would have been in the sell side or sales world, I would have laughed. I originally started doing media analysis for Goldman Sachs out of college. Thought that was going to be the route I was going to go through on the PR side of it. Long and short of it, I was approached by a group out of Dallas. Well, they're a global group, but they're based out of Dallas, called Henry Schein, large distribution company, Fortune 200. And they had asked me, based on an encounter we had at a university seminar, career fair that I had, finagled my way into. So I guess I was kind of foreshadowing my potential future in gaining an advantage in sales. But I met them and then went and interviewed with them on the distribution side. And that's how I got into the whole dental sales world. So they had asked me to come on and be their first intern for the company's history, and had developed a very successful internship program for them. Now it's over 100 interns nationwide. And that's how I got introduced into the space of healthcare.
Great. And how long were you with them? How long were you with that business?
Sir, I was in the distribution space for 10 years. So I was there for quite some time before I decided to pivot into the M&A space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And now, what's the difference between distribution in your mind versus M&A?
Totally different worlds in my mind. So distribution, we were selling products for manufacturers. So
okay,
I worked at a dental company. Manufacturers would develop these products, equipment, technology, supplies. Then through the distribution process, they would have sales representatives that were in charge of different regions, cities, states, government entities like schools, etc. And we would go out there and sell these products. We definitely were not the cheapest, and that's what we did on the distribution side. And then on the M&A side is on the back end of the careers, right? Is at least how it started out. The M&A process has evolved a lot, and I'm happy to touch more on that and what that really means. But is you're getting ones on the front end of the career typically, or they've kind of got ingrained in their business and their practice and their day-to-day, and the others on the back end where they're ready to exit, right? Or start thinking about exiting their practice and into the next phase of their career, or finding a strategic partner, which is what Triumphant Partners excels at.
That's great. That's great. And then so you started into the back end, the exit side, right? And so how did that go? Like, did you start your own firm? Did you work with somebody, a different company, or?
Initially, I was approached by a great group out of Dallas, Texas. They had just developed their first sponsor, or just got their first sponsor. I was their first director of business development. So I started up buying practices. So they approached me actually here in Austin, Texas, all the way back in 2017, and said, look, Nate, you've come highly recommended in the industry. We need somebody to help build our brand, right? We need somebody to go approach doctors, develop that trust, has that reputation, has the credibility to basically partner with us, right? They're selling a majority of their business. It's their baby. Most of them have never had a boss, or it's been multiple decades until they've had somebody helping them manage the day-to-day operations. So I joined them. I saw their vision. I was intrigued by it. To be candid, I didn't know much about it. And then when I got to see behind the curtain of how the metrics of buying a practice, a business, but definitely a dental practice in this instance, it definitely piqued my interest. So after helping them acquire 220 practices at that time, now they're about 1,000 practices in 42 states. I think they just sold for the third time for $3.5 billion back in November of actually 2024. So they've definitely been very successful. I realized there was a niche. When we sat I sat on the board. When I sat around the table every Tuesday, we would evaluate businesses that would come in, anywhere from 30 practices to 300 for the week. Right? It's a pretty intensive process. And I realized there was a lot of money being left on the table. For starters, I looked at honestly our P&L and realized that there's a lot of money being spent in direct marketing. So I felt like, okay, there's something unique here, right? And obviously there's investors. Now that they had a sponsor, right? They had financial capital supporting them that, maybe buying low and selling high was probably an objective there.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad thing. Again, great group. They've done phenomenal. They're actually applying for an IPO now, but I realized there wasn't enough representation out there for providers, for doctors, for very highly educated, the top 1% of what they do. But you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing clinicians running the day-to-day process, or how to exit strategically again and on their terms was lacking. And so I realized there was a void there. And that's how I decided to switch from the buy side to the sell side back in 2020. So after I left them, spent my time there, went to the sell side in 2020 and partnered with a small group out of Austin, Texas, and quadrupled their income. And then the birth of Triumphant Partners came out of that experience.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you make a great point there. Like, you can be really good at what you do and have like an incredibly successful practice.
Yeah.
But when you step into to a sales process, right? I mean, it is a completely different world, a completely different skill set. There's terms and conditions and financing and all sorts of things that you probably may have never ever dealt with as a physician or a dentist, right? And so having somebody like you come along and be able to kind of give them the lay of the land, best practices, and also to know what have an idea what your practice is like really worth, right? So like on valuation, right? Typically, what have you seen between like the spread between what somebody might think their practice is worth, and then when you go in and kind of help them understand where hey, well, maybe we can get another turn on earnings, by doing this or structuring things a little differently. What type of how does that happen?
I love that you asked this question, Chris. Everyone thinks they're the prettiest baby. Let's start
Mm-hmm.
there, and I mean that kindly, right? There's always stuff to work on, even if it's the best business or businesses. There's always something to tweak, right? And the way we evaluate practices, we do a full underwriting process. At my firm, we have healthcare specific CPAs. Literally, their entire career has been dealing with evaluating healthcare practices, whether it's dental and medical. That's all they know. So they didn't start somewhere else, and they came over. We've kind of built it from the ground up, or they've come from a competitor or buy side. And so the way we evaluate that is we'll go through 3 years of financials. We'll go through the general ledger. We'll ensure that we capture, one-time expenses, non-recurring expenses, even normalizing the expense. Meaning, if you're going to partner with a group, part of what they're going to bring to us as a partnership is buying power, right? So that's going to bring down their cost. So we don't want our clients to inherit their original cost. We want them to inherit the cost that they're going to be getting with a partner. So through that, we develop their cash flow, and that's how we look to find them a buyer based on their multiple. Now, where they think they land versus where they actually land definitely varies. And here's why. We had a crazy thing called COVID. Money was cheap, right? Below inflation rates.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of money was being spent. So there was a lot of purchases and acquisitions being made in dental alone in 2022. There was 130 billion with a B in M&A activity. That's more than ophthalmology. That's more in cardiology. That was more in plastic surgery and more in dermatology combined, which is 110 billion at that time. So that shows you the activity in that space. So it's definitely been a correction. And I tell you this history on that because it comes to the conversation of where they're really at versus what they really are on the fair market, right? On the market level. So we do an intensive evaluation on the process. So we typically do land though traditionally about 30-40% higher though than what they get from a direct offer. We deal with that. We definitely get plenty of clients that do come from competitors that just don't understand the buying process of it. Again, do a good job, but just again, there's different metrics that do move the needle. I sat on that board and bought the practices, and it doesn't matter. There could be higher revenue, but we sometimes pay more for lower right? For different variables. So it definitely varies, but we traditionally get about 30 to 40% higher for our clients than what they think they're going to get actually. So it definitely turns out to be a successful experience.
So maybe their baby's cuter than they thought, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if there's not, we have a kind of a kickstart program where we definitely coach them through it. I mean, so we want to ensure that they exit. It's one of their biggest assets, right? It's going to be one of their biggest decisions, maybe outside of marriage and children, that they're going to make. So we will coach them through that. We have plenty of clients once we get to what's called our expense review. So we'll go through their earnings potential. We'll build out what's called a waterfall and show them what their earnings is going to be from year 1, year 3, year 5, year 8, year 10, if they were to partner side by side today. So they're going to know full landscape of what their earnings potential will be if they decide to sell their baby, right? And if it's not to where they're expected to be at, and if it's not to the liking, or they think their baby's worth more, we'll again coach them through that process, consult them, and advise them, and say, hey, this is how, if you want to get it from A to B, this is how we're going to get there. So we walk them through that process. We do quarterly updates, et cetera, et cetera. So it tends to be that their baby is very pretty and prettier than they expect. In the instance that it's not, we'll definitely ensure it gets to the level it needs to be at.
And so, like, let's say there's scenarios where, like, you have a dentist or a physician, right, who is talking to, like, maybe a smaller group versus a large company that's rolling up a lot of, like, a big strategic buyer.
Yep.
What's the difference that you see in terms of, multiples between a smaller group making a purchase versus a really large group with a lot of maybe private equity capital behind them?
Sure. That's where knowing the marketplace and coming from the buy side helps. We mentioned the word niche. That's where this niche comes in. We talked about this earlier, timing, right? Timing is everything. Whether you're small or you're large and you have a big capital backer, or you're still have your lender or your lender covenants, and you can only spend X amount, right? So it does vary. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're bigger, that you're one better, and that you can pay more. Sure, you may be more robust in some senses, but there's a lot more red tape. You have more cash, but you have to spend it and spread it out a lot of places. So what we try to do again is align our client with the right culture and timing, right? So they have a certain amount of EBITDA that they need to purchase, right? So they're trying to buy a certain, let's just call it a cash flow conversation. And I'm happy to go into what that means. I know you know better than anybody, but we try to time it, whether they're small, medium, or large, with when they need to buy. Are they going to a cap table? Are they going to recap? Are they going to find another investor to invest to that company to pay out their prior investors and continue to scale? Mm-hmm. So we love to time that with the right group when they're about to take it to market, because that's when multiples go up, okay, right? Or they find a partner and they have a bunch of capital that's been in flux, but now they got to spend it. So we want to catch them on that new, fresh tail end of it, or the beginning process with the new investor. So whether it's small or large, it technically doesn't matter a ton. It's just, where are they at in the process, maturity wise? Are they ready to take it to market? Did they just come through a process of finding an investor? Did they just recapitalize their business? And that's really what kind of develops the conversation.
And so, if what would, like let's say I'm selling my practice and you're helping me.
Sure.
Do I just receive my full payout up front and then I'm gone? Is there a transition period? Is there a portion of the purchase price that's like an earn out that is based on performance and how well the transition goes? What does that look like?
It's definitely in different segments. So a majority will be cash. Right, they're buying a majority of your business. And there's two different models. There's a full-on exit. They'll buy 100% of you. We'll negotiate a length of time, but you stick around. It can be as little as 6 months. It could be up to 5 years. There's the joint venture model, where they're buying a majority, but you retain a minority interest in your business. And it's really kind of betting on yourself and having to go into more detail on what that really means, for a client. But the typical deal structure is going to be cash majority, 51 to 80%, let's just say, of that deal.
Yeah.
With another, let's say, 20 to 30% of that going to be in equity, some either ownership in this holdco, meaning stock into this company, right, the parent company, or really stock into your company. They're going to put a value on the percentage that you still maintain of your business. They're going to put a price on that. So when they go to sell, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, whatever the multiple is going to be, you're going to see the return, whether it's on their stock level, their holdco equity that it's grown into, when you spread it out amongst all their locations, or you're just betting on yourself and what you've built through their support, right? Their services, their human capital, their capital, what that turns into, you're betting you'll get the return on that. And then there is now what you see a lot more of is earnouts. Again, during the COVID period, 2020 to 2022 was kind of a funky year. 2023 was actually the worst year in M&A since 2011. It's picked back up. A lot more cash has been on the sidelines, ready to deploy. The people that were disciplined are now very hungry. They have to spend. They were waiting for this opportunity. So there's a lot, but there is a lot more earnouts being built into it because there was a lot of cash being spent on the front end. So we're not a big on earnouts. Not saying that that's not a part of the process. We like to include growth bonuses. So I want you to get your cash. You've worked very hard for your business, right? You have an asset that's amazing. We want to ensure that you get paid for that. Now, we'd like to reward you too, though, for continuing to stay around for that. We don't think it should be penalized and held back from you. So while there is earnouts, meaning they're going to pay you a percentage or a sliver of that every, a third of it, a fifth of it, however the time you commit to stay with that company for that amount, we like to give you a growth bonus, meaning if you continue to produce and grow, especially on the scale that you're already doing, right, with their support, they should help you lift overnight, at least on average about 20%, that you get paid for that. I mean, it's what you worked for. It's what you're probably relying on, or it's helping. So those are the types of structure. It's going to be cash, some types of equity. Again, the holdco or the joint venture model, and earn out some instances or growth bonuses, which is something that we try as a caveat at our firm to include versus that. So it doesn't hurt them, impact them,
Right.
if they don't meet those goals.
Great. And I know that a lot of dentists and physicians over the years have made a really good decision to buy the building, right, where they put their practice. So let's say that they have basically two big assets that are connected to their business. The actual practice and the building and the real estate. So let's pretend I also own my building.
Sure.
How do you help with that?
Great. That's a good question. No one's ever asked this. 90% of our clients own their building. They're on the real estate. We don't choose it. It happens to be part of the scenario, but they're usually pretty savvy at what they're doing, right? They've realized, hey, they don't want to be paying this rent, right? They want to get passive income once they pay off this building. We love it. So what we do is we represent them on not only the transaction of their practice, right, or the clinical aspect of it, but of the real estate. So we'll help them negotiate and lock in a long-term triple net lease, right? They're passing down, which means they're passing down the expenses to the tenant. We'll bring in a high credit tenant, right? These groups that are backed by private equity or family office, meaning they have a lot of capital to spend. So they have big balance sheets. They look very good, and they'll come in and overnight raise the building, appreciate that building at least 30%. So we will negotiate the lease for them. We'll lock it in for them. We'll put annual escalations, meaning they're going to be paying 2%, 3%, 3.5% more on their lease every year for the life of that lease. And we like to, approach it at 20 years, 10 years with 2 5-year options. Not saying that happens every time, but again, it's something I would be looking at. If I owned a building, right, Chris, we're representing you. You owned your practice in your building, obviously selling your practice, getting you this growth bonus, right, getting your cash, making sure your equity actually sees a return too. That's important, right? We vet everybody. Have they done retail? Have they done healthcare? Have they scaled? Have they exited, et cetera? What's their goal? But also on the real estate side, that's what one of the key factors that separates us is that we understand the commercial aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's great because when they, let's say they paid off their building, they get this, national credit level tenant in there, and then and understandably you want to pay off the building when you own it. But now that you've shifted into that real estate investor, commercial real estate owner, I mean, you might even be able to do like a cash out refinance, take a lot of the equity off the table, have it to invest to support your lifestyle, to go buy buy that vacation home you've always wanted, and you still have the cash flow. So that I could see that being a really important part of that transaction.
Based on the way we structure that transaction, right? If there's more cash going to the real estate, there may be some benefits there. versus all going toward the
Mm-hmm.
clinical aspect of the practice that helps them for tax purposes. Also, we're big on promoting as much goodwill as possible toward that transaction, so they're getting tax on cap gains, et cetera. So that's something our firm would work with a firm like yours, right, to ensure that our clients are exiting with the highest amount possible. I mean, that's the point, right? It's really providing the good culture, the support they're looking for, but enjoying what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
You know, we want them to be excited about it, and the real estate is a huge, huge factor in that.
Well, and that, again, like the holistic approach, right? It's all facets of what they built, helping them maximize that value, right? So that, whatever whatever the next stage of their lives looks like, they're on, a much more stronger footing, and kind of reaching that summit of financial freedom, right? That we're all climbing towards.
Exactly right. And our clients aren't distressed sellers, right? They're high revenue, high net worth, and not saying you need to be, right? I mean, I think if you're a practitioner or even a business owner, right, there's something different about you, right? You taking that jump. You definitely have a lot of gumption. You definitely have a lot of nerve, right, to do it. And so you typically, though, you're going to take some chances, right? There's definitely risk involved, and it's quite an experience. I know we experienced that starting this firm. It definitely, I remember the first full year was one of the most sleepless years I've ever had, outside of probably having my two young daughters. But anyways, they are willing to take the risk. So we want to position them properly to again maintain that, understand it, and then exit out on the terms they're looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on the whole ownership mindset. It really, going through that, taking that step forward, being the one that's ultimately accountable for everything, it really does change you. It just changes how you think about things, and how you view the world, right? And so, you mentioned, on when you made that transition into, starting up the firm, like that first year, like at what point did you know, like what was it a particular deal or a connection, or some sort of exposure where you knew you hit that tipping point where, okay, this is going to work. This is going to be a long-term business for me. I'm going to be successful in this, and I'm ready to really grow it and scale it.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to respond to that. I always felt like it would be successful. I didn't know how. And I don't mean that in some arrogant way by any stretch.
Well, you have to have faith in yourself, and faith in what you're doing. You get to make that step, right? So there's got to be, whether it's temporary insanity or a clear vision, everybody has to take that step, right?
Yeah, and my wife would probably say insanity. I definitely I saw the process, so I helped the company when I left the buy side to join a sell side company. They were up and coming. Again, this is part of the process too. If you're selling your business, I would definitely look at doing the full due diligence on the company you're partnering with. And I did not do that, so I definitely learned the hard way. So I joined a company that I thought was more established than they were. So that was lesson one. So I joined them. I said, okay, well, we probably need to get a website and stuff like that to kind of promote ourselves and get more active in the community. Thankfully, I had contacts from my time in distribution and then on the buy side as well. So I came with a decade plus of experience into that. And so by building that company out, I saw how me and my partner were kind of approaching it. He was definitely on a different part of his career. I was building up my career, newborn, just got a new home, just got married. So there was a lot more on the line for him who was more established than I was at the time. And I said, look, if I'm helping build this out now, why am I not doing this for myself? And I didn't want it to scale, he wanted to, stay a little bit more regionalized than I would have.
And more of a lifestyle business versus a growth, right?
Correct. We had different ambitions on that. So I decided to start it. And I'll tell you this, there was many when we launched this, we're about 28 months old. December of 2022 is when I officially left that firm. We launched April 1st of 2023.
Which is, like what you said, was one of the worst markets, right?
The worst market. You definitely have to be temporarily insane to start M&A. I mean, rates were tripling, so it was the worst time to be starting an M&A company and going out and asking for these multiples of, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Again, the times is that multiple on the deal. So I started that. I had a lot of sleepless nights, but I just kept at it and believed on it because I saw what I did for the prior firm
Mhm.
and I saw how it was done. And I felt like with the belief that we had, that the experience that we had, that we were going to be successful. Just sometimes I didn't know when,
Mhm.
when that day was going to pop. And we actually officially closed our first deal on New Year's Eve of 2023. And then which made 2024 definitely a very successful year from the seeds we had planted and sown, et cetera. But that's when I knew when I helped build out the first company, I guess, long answer, but is that we built it and I saw the do's and don'ts of a small firm. I came from a large firm. I took what I liked from both and developed a process that I thought would be, we could replicate at a boutique firm like mine.
That's great. And like I always like to ask like kind of what makes you different. I know there's like business brokers out there and other people in that space trying to, you know, sell companies, buy businesses. Like, so what would make you different than say a business broker?
Sure. Oh, it's a good question again, and not to keep saying that and sound redundant, but it is. We take a more advisory approach, right? While there's there's fees associated with it. For us, it's very relational. As I started at the biggest brokers in the country,
Mhm.
then I started at probably the smallest brokers in the country, and I took what I liked and what I didn't, and I said, look, how can we do this better? And I realized during the process, again, with these sophisticated individuals, very smart individuals, the 1% of what they do, that there's still a lot of anxiety there, right? There's still a whole process. Financial terms, absolutely important, but there's more to it, right? They're giving up control. They're trusting. They're not the person, right? They're not the go-to anymore, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we want to remain as much autonomy as possible. So I was like, well, what if we can develop a process and an approach that makes them feel confident
Mhm.
and comfortable in what they're doing when they're doing it? And that's what separated us. We're definitely a quality based firm. We pass on more deals than we take on. We have buy side experience. So 80% of my team came from the buying side, meaning knowing how to evaluate the business first before they knew how to sell. I think that's absolutely important. You got to know.
And I guess that's a great point. Understanding how the buyers are going to underwrite a deal, like how, I mean, does that give you more leverage in the negotiations when you're talking to them in their language, when you're speaking their language and speaking to what they're, what kind of the different financial levers they're using to create that valuation? I mean, how does that play out?
Absolutely. It's invaluable, right? We know their language. We know what they're going through too. Just as much as the doctor is probably stressed out about it and they're having this conversation with their spouse at night and they're probably awake and, they're dealing with all the aspects of their business, just like we are, right? We want to, focus on our clients. What can move the needle for them, excite them. The buyers are too, because they have investors that have invested a lot of time and a lot of money into them, but they also have a time limit. So to be able to understand where they're coming from and comfort them in a sense, right? And say, hey, look, we understand. We know where you're coming from. We've been in your seat. Definitely kind of de-escalates or de-stresses them and say, look, this is why this opportunity makes sense for you. This is why it's going to take your business from X to Y in Z amount of time.
Hmm.
Because time is, as we all know, is our most precious asset. And that's what they're up against. Because if not, if they don't purchase the right amount of EBITDA or practices or volume, however you want to phrase it, they got to return the money in essence,
Hmm.
right? And that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
So we understand exactly what they're looking for, what they're looking for in that practice, and how to get it to them in a quick amount of time or in the right amount of time is probably the better way to say that. But so yeah, understanding their language and where they're going through experiencing is been allowed us to move more deals than I ever did in my prior company.
And you mentioned, like with interest rates doing what they're doing, what are you seeing like in terms of, like financing, right? I mean, whether it's, I mean, obviously some of these bigger firms might have their sponsors and their source of capital, but they're still going to be using debt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so what are you seeing now? What's different over the last 2 or 3 years?
I've seen a lot more seller financing. To be candid, I've seen a lot more seller taking more of a risk with the buyer or proving more of the value of that practice. When before it was just very straightforward. Here's some cash. Here's some ownership in our company or remaining in your company. Now I see a lot more seller notes being presented. I've been seeing a lot more growth opportunities or earnouts, as you mentioned earlier, being introduced to a deal than I've ever seen before. And I've definitely been seeing less cash at close. When we see on average 70 to 80% of the deal at least being cash, now it's 51 to 60%. That's been the big shift that we've seen.
And are the sellers being compensated for that additional risk? I mean, are they seeing, getting more, another turn on the multiple for accepting the risk and becoming more of a partner with the buyer?
Yes, absolutely. So the upside is higher, right? So their return on that equity for taking the risk and taking less cash up front is that they'll get paid more on the back end of the deal, right? When they then go find this sponsor or this private equity or this other investor, right? So their multiple is either A, we're putting in what's called a put, meaning that they're going to get paid a pre-agreed to multiple at the end of their term, 3 years, 5 years, or as long as they want to go, or that the multiple that they're going to get is going to be much higher than what they anticipate, and we'll put that into the agreement as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Great. So, and I'm just curious, like, how do buyers and sellers, or how do sellers find you?
For us, fortunately, by starting out in the distribution world, spending a decade there, and then spending several years on the buy side, a lot of it's been organic, thankfully, through good experience, which again brings us back to the uniqueness of, I believe, our firm. Um, we're very white glove. We take the responsibility off the doctor. We know they're busy. We want them to focus on patient care first. It's all confidential, and we want them to be able to check out and go enjoy life, right? We understand that the business never stops, even if your hours of operations are from X to Y. We take that burden off them. So by doing that, I feel like approach, you mentioned holistic earlier as well. We've had a lot of organic growth come from good experiences. I have a lot of people from my last firm call me still. I have obviously from the current company, the Triumphant Partners, that we've done a lot of I guess quality transactions for them that they felt excited about and had a good experience as well. They will tell their friends. So that's where our sellers have been coming from, through organic growth. Now we're getting more in a presence of speaking out. The brand is getting out there more. We're getting the opportunity to kind of be there with on different tables on a more national scale.
Sure.
But right now it's been, or at least for starting out, it's been through just a good experience.
Well, I think, the fact, you mentioned like the white glove
Yeah.
approach to it, right? Where they can still focus on their practice because, there have been situations in the past that I've seen where, somebody's in the process of selling their business and they lose focus on the day-to-day operation and of their business while they're trying to sell it. And then their revenues start to decline a little bit. And then the buyer is like, oh, well, there's a trend. So now your business is worth less, right? So the service you're providing them with that white glove treatment, yeah, allows them to maintain their revenues, keep growing their practice. And do you think that results into potentially more money at closing for them?
100%. Absolutely. We're here for them to exit out at the highest possible. And I always tell people, look, one, if you even own a business, we should talk, a healthcare business. Or if you're at least 10 years out and thinking about it. The median age of our client right now is 44. Very young, right? Long runway. They're looking for a partnership for strategic, maybe quality of life to improve, whatever the scenario could be. But yeah, our goal is to definitely put them in the best position possible to excel, right? To remain autonomy, though, we're very big against rebranding. Not to say it can't happen, but traditionally it does not happen. We want to get them with the groups that know that what they're doing. They've been in the healthcare industry. I can't preach that enough about finding someone that's at least healthcare specific, right? Just like we're not going to go again see our cardiologist if there's a heart issue. I'm not gonna just rely on my family doctor. I'm probably gonna go see a specialist, right? Orthopedic, whatever, right? There's a reason that there are people that have spent more time educating themselves on a different subject. But so our goal is to put them in the best position possible. We evaluate it all the time, and we have those conversations every day, saying, hey, you're just not ready, right? Or if you're ready, this is what you should expect. But we don't encourage that for you. We're happy to wait this out and coach you through it, or it's not the right time in the market. Now we're hoping to see some Fed cuts. right, coming soon. It was announced in Jackson Hole not too long ago that something would be coming. So we're definitely anticipating that. Now that could be a good time, right?
Sure.
So as money starts becoming a little more affordable, but yeah, we'll definitely coach them through the entire process. And again, for us, it's a long term deal. It's a lifetime deal. As you know, it goes back to where do we get our leads from, or where do we get doctors approaching us? It's through good experiences. It's through honest experiences. It's through transparent experience. We're not trying to get them in and out the door. We're not owned by shareholders, right? We're not some publicly traded company that needs to hit a certain quota and to meet our shares and whatnot. We're definitely quality based. That's why we don't take on more than we can chew. We all touch every facet of that opportunity. So they talk from me all the way down to our junior analyst, right? We're all going to be touching it and giving our input. We meet daily on it, have our weekly strategy calls. How do we move it? But we definitely don't. We ensure we do not take on more than we can chew, because we want to make sure that they get the best care as possible.
Yeah, and you mentioned like that it's a long-term process because, a lot of times when anybody who owns a business, sometimes they're have the mistaken impression or assumption that like, okay, I'm ready to sell it. Let's put it on the market, right? I mean, it is they don't realize that it can take 2-3 years to essentially set the table to make their business or their practice look as desirable as possible, so that when they do sell it, the prospective buyers, when they're coming in, there's hopefully no red flags, right, that would cause them to give pause, and so that the numbers look really good. And another thing that comes up a lot is when you mentioned timing, right? I mean, you could have been doing a great job building your practice up, and maybe you're thinking, okay, 2023 is going to be the year, and then the market goes south.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe that's where you say, okay, we're just going to operate for another year or two until the conditions improve. So, so timing, right? Time in preparation, and then timing will generate, the higher sales price for somebody. So I think that's a really good point. And it's really important for people to understand. And, could you take us through the process of, like, let's say you have some, maybe the difference between selling to another, say a smaller physician group or dental group versus selling to one of the larger companies that's out there rolling up practices with the intent of going public, per se.
Sure.
Is there a huge difference in the process, or is it fairly similar level of sophistication? I mean,
That's a good question again. The process is going to be pretty similar. We're extremely thorough, whether you have one location or you have 40 locations, right? Obviously one takes more time than the other, but again, we do ask for more financials and practice management reports and probably more questions than most. And there's a reason for that, because once you find the right partner, right, we start with a big net, then we kind of slim that down, and that's when we introduce them to our client, because we don't want to waste their time either. We want to ensure they're going to play ball, right? Give us the terms that we're looking for. We're in the valuation range that we're looking for. We're in the time frame that our client wants to stay working, or at least have the optionality of leaving when they want to leave, rent, talk about real estate, etc. So the process is still the same as far as how we do it. Now, how the buyers maybe approach it could be a little bit different. You're dealing with a lot more red tape. When they're larger companies, it's getting access. Access is probably the biggest key.
mm-hmm.
Is it just how nimble can they be? So when they're larger, it definitely takes a little bit more time, a little more process. They're probably looking at a different caliber of practice, meaning, maybe they're adding a footprint to a different marketplace versus somebody that's trying to get up and going, or just add to an existing marketplace. But the process is still the same. It doesn't matter, again, how big you are. They're all treated, the same. It just might be a little bit more repetition.
Okay. And then once, like, let's say, you've gone through the, that phase where where you're setting the table, you're setting the practice up for sale.
Yep.
Once let's say a buyer, you find a buyer and there's interest, you think it's going to be a good fit. How long does that typically take from the time of, like, kind of that initial LOI or NDA to closing?
We like to target 6 months.
Okay.
It sounds ambitious. If everything's done properly, we can traditionally move something in that amount of time. So that's a fairly quick transition from when we engage one another, decide to work together, we figure needs, and that's typically our timeline. we move as fast as a client wants to move too, right? So we'll sit there, we'll go through it. If we get the financials, we gather the reporting, we do all that for them too. So they're not having to do anything outside of maybe an introduction to their CPA firm, their wealth advisor, if there's a tax planner, somebody like your group that we'll get involved with. So as soon as we get those items, we can move pretty efficiently and quickly as possible. But that's the average of how most deals go. Now, if there's multiple locations, it's a more sophisticated transaction. It's these platform opportunities, which we do a lot of, meaning we have a collection of healthcare practices. We will find a private equity firm looking to get either into the healthcare space, or they're already in the healthcare space, but they want to be in a new market. That's something that I focus a lot on. My firm focuses a lot on as well. And that can take more time because you're sitting there presenting them a new opportunity for why they need to invest income into a new market, a new specialty, potentially a new industry for them if they haven't spent a ton of time in healthcare. But that our average deal is about 6 months.
It's about 6 months.
No.
Okay. So, when we're talking about like kind of what ultimately really what makes you different, why would they choose to work with you? What would you like to share on that?
Sure. I can't impress upon this enough of the white glove approach. And really, what does that mean, right? Sure, I've been a part of 1,000+ transactions, over $1 billion in total enterprise value in a short career, really, compared to most, at least in this industry. We're very cognizant of the client and what they're experiencing and what they're going through. So what that means is we're all about confidentiality, 100%. We don't want their team to know. It's a stressful situation already, right? They're deciding to sell what they've built and potentially have, a partner now, which they've never had. We don't want the team to find out, which causes stress, which can cause dissension amongst the practice, which means that the patient care could suffer. We want things to go status quo. We don't want a competitor down the road to fear, hey, Dr. Chris is selling now. Let me start poaching from him, or saying he's going corporate, right? Which is a word that gets thrown around because people want to feel that human care, right? And so do we. We want them to feel that as well. So part of what I feel like separates us, and I know separates us because I've heard this, is that we have an all hands on deck approach. Everything is completely confidential. We understand it's a stressful situation. We don't have quarterly earnings, right? We don't have shareholders. If somebody needs to wait, we will tell them to wait. We are not in this to get a quick buck and leave. We are in there to build a relationship for a lifetime. And whoever they sell that to, potentially they come to us, but really we care about them maximizing the value of their asset and exiting at the proper time. And we walk them through that entire scenario, how life looks like today, how it will look like tomorrow, and when to move. But we do that completely discreetly. And I can't emphasize that enough because a lot of times it's not done discreetly. It can be done, almost negligible in a sense, which impacts everything. And if that business starts declining, that's the absolute worst time to sell. Nobody wants to buy a depreciating asset. They're worried about what's going on. They're investing tons of money. The type of partners that we bring in are fully autonomous. A lot of our competitors or a lot of other advisory firms or brokers don't do that. There's over 1,000 dental service organizations or management service organizations in the country right now, meaning these are groups that back and sponsor, support, own dental or medical practices. At least 25% of those are backed by a private equity firm. We maybe on the high end work with 8 to 10% of that entire 1,000, right? So let's just call it 100 for easy math. Again, another thing that separates us is that we are very in tune with what our client is looking for. They're not looking for someone to tell them what to do and be some W-2 employee that needs to show up and work X hours, right? We want them to have full autonomy and continue being the leader in the practice to the point to where the check that goes to their patient, or excuse me, to their team, still has their name on it. So we're very big on the total experience of them still remaining in control. But now they just have some private backing, as much or as little as they want. And we're very big on who we work with. We're very selective. Our goal here, and the reason this company was born, is that we wanted, when our brand came across someone's desk, email inbox, phone call, calling, etc., that they knew as a quality doctor, that they needed to move respectfully, right? That they're going to need to understand that they're going to be in the competitive process and pay top dollar because these are top practitioners, and everything's going to be 100% confidential. And we're not here to do it and move them quickly. We're here to do them at the right time, at the right price, and strategically. And I feel like that separates us from most people out there.
No, that's great. And I mean, I would think that, most dentists, most physicians who have, built their practice, have spent like 10, 20, 30 years operating their practice. The last thing they would want is to be, a W-2 employee, and they'd be looking for more like a partner. And I think that, with Triumphant and Nate, you'd have a great partner in selling your practice, and somebody that you can trust and count on. So, we encourage you to reach out to them. And, really appreciate you being on the podcast. Really enjoyed getting to know you better. And I know I'm very confident that you're going to have a lot of success in the future.
Chris, we appreciate your time and having us on here. And look, we're here to educate anybody at any time. They can always reach out to us, info@triumphantransition.com. Call our office, 512-924-8808. We're here to answer any questions, whether you use us or not. It's okay. We're here to educate people. We want them to feel confident and comfortable, because it is a stressful situation, but it doesn't need to be.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you again for coming and being on today.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks again for watching the Business Growth Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the episode, and we'll see you on the next episode.